Hi friends, it's Katie here. Welcome down the rabbit hole. Thank you for joining me over the past 2 videos to travel down this incredibly sick, sad rabbit hole that is Dan Schneider's time at Nickelodeon Studios. Quiet on the Set is a new docu-series that is exposing the reality of abuse at Nickelodeon. These are young children who were used and abused by the Hollywood system, taken advantage of by people who were supposed to protect them. But I need to be honest, my next videos are going to expose an awful lot more. The second 2 episodes of Quiet on the Set are difficult to get through because everything we've heard about Dan Schneider so far cannot compare to what we are about to hear regarding convicted offenders who were working on Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon sets. I wanted to warn you, but I hope that you'll still choose to join me down this rabbit hole because these children's stories deserve to be told. And the time has come for the general public to start being honest with themselves about what's going on at Nickelodeon.
I'm wearing popper pants! Popper pants? Yeah, the popcorn you make in your pants. Watch!
This is Amanda. I sure hope you liked my act.
What is your name, Amanda?
Hi, my name is Amanda Bynes. I'm 9 years old.
How old are you, by the way?
I'm 10.
You're 10 years old.
I'm 12, turning 13 April 3rd. Yeah.
Amanda Bynes' amazing personality and star quality was too big to stay part of an ensemble cast on all that. It was time for her to get her own show, The Amanda Show, and it quickly became a fan favorite.
And at the time, she talked about wanting to take on more adult roles.
On Nickelodeon, I had to do a lot of like slapsticky. I was always wearing wigs and doing all that. But I got to a point I was growing up that I wanted to feel like my age and like a girl and do all that.
Amanda was growing up, and Dan Schneider, unfortunately, was right there, growing along with her. He wanted to follow Amanda into her adult career.
That's what I like about you.
Dan Schneider created a show called What I Like About You on the WB with a 16-year-old Amanda Bynes.
And Dan really wanted to follow Amanda into this mainstream success.
For whatever inappropriate reason, Dan Schneider thought it was like his goal in life to help usher in a new era of Amanda in adult comedy.
But there's already trouble on set.
Dan had a very specific image of how he wanted What I Like About You to go.
And to be honest, Amanda was his ticket out of working with kids for the rest of his life. He clearly needed to move to the next stage of his career. He didn't want to be considered a child producer and writer forever.
But he was constantly fighting with the co-creator of What I Like About You, Will Calhoun from Friends.
Okay, big surprise. Dan couldn't play with the big boys, with the adults, with adult humans. He was struggling. He couldn't get along with anyone. He wouldn't listen to others. He wasn't willing to compromise with like the writers and producers from Friends. Like, he thought he was as good and better than these people who wrote and produced Friends. So, he wasn't going to hack it for very long on this show. And that's exactly what happened. He got booted out of the writer's room. He was allowed to remain a producer on the show for a period of time, but he was no longer writing for Amanda's show.
And there was just this massive amount of tension there where the network didn't really trust Dan.
And they stepped in. He got pushed out from the writer's room.
Dan is no longer a writer, but he's still a producer on the show. And he's still acting weird with Amanda Bynes.
Amanda's relationship with Dan was very close.
He thought that he should be the one to kind of usher Amanda into adulthood.
Okay, so here's what I'm personally seeing. Like, leave a comment below about what you think. But what I'm seeing is that Dan Schneider couldn't hack it on his own. He wanted to ride Amanda's star, sadly, off into the sunset. Like, he knew that this was his ticket out of where he didn't want to be anymore, and he had partially lost it at this point, right? He's no longer allowed to write for the show, and this was a really big thing for him. So he's kind of like standing back in the sidelines, creepily like waiting for his next opportunity to hop back on Amanda's star and ride it much further down the line.
Amanda and her parents were not getting along.
Enter the normal goings on of a teenager versus her parents when she's going through puberty. Amanda ends up getting into a major disagreement with her mom and dad and deciding that she wants to try to file for emancipation.
Amanda tries to run away from home, and in this moment, she turns to Dan for help.
Oh, what a perfect scenario for a pedophile, right? Okay, I'm not saying that Dan is a pedophile, but of course he's going to use this to his advantage. He's 110% on Amanda's side. He just wants to help her, and he recognizes that her parents, they're not cool. They don't know what's going on like he does. So he gets involved and gets some lawyers and tries to help her legally separate herself from her parents. It's not the first time it's been done. The documentary series makes it obvious that there are a lot of kids in Nickelodeon and Disney who have worked towards emancipation because, well, first off, it gives them freedom. And second off, it allows them to work more, work longer hours on the set and just, you know, be fully taken advantage of in the ways that people like Dan Schneider really want them to be taken advantage of. So Dan works hardcore on making this happen for Amanda. But the thing is, Amanda's parents were some of the better parents. For all the possible mistakes they may have made in life, everyone reports that Amanda's parents were loving, caring, and very involved. And when Dan Schneider and Amanda took her parents to court, they lost. Her parents maintained custody of Amanda and immediately cut Dan Schneider out of her life. Go, mom and dad.
And we also know that Amanda's parents are really, really upset with Dan's actions through this.
This is where Dan Schneider's public and direct involvement with Amanda Bynes' career and social life supposedly ends. There's a lot more to say about this when it comes to Amanda Bynes, but I'm going to have to pick back up on that later in this series, because for now, we're going to follow Dan and see what happens after he's been completely disgraced by being kicked off this new show with Amanda.
And Nickelodeon obviously wanted him because here's a guy, he's responsible for a couple of really successful shows for them.
So Dan's career is over, right? Oh, no. He can't hack it in the adult world. So let's put him back on stage with a bunch of little kids who need really responsible and mature adults around them. He goes back to Nickelodeon. And surprise, surprise, he's more of an ass than he's ever been before because, let's be honest, he's probably pretty resentful that things didn't work out for him in Big Boy Land. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. So much to say about Dan Schneider. But for now, in this piece of the docuseries, we're going to move forward and talk about the completely disgusting pedophiles that surrounded Dan on the set. Let's start out with Jason Handy.
Jason Handy He looked like a goofy white boy from Nebraska. Hey guys, how you doing?
Jason is introduced to us through the lens of a mother who wanted to be a child actress. She makes that very clear.
To be an actress when I was young.
And when she had her own daughter, she decided to go ahead and put her on film. She takes her to Nickelodeon Studios, and her daughter, whose name is Brandy and does not appear in the film, ends up just being an extra on sets of like All That and other shows.
We were greeted by a production assistant, Jason Handy, who guided all the kids to where they need to be.
While they're there, they meet a man named Jason Handy. I think the mom and the daughter seem to think Jason is more well-connected than he really is because he's actually a PA. He's an assistant on set, and his job is just kind of like to watch the kids and move them from room to room when their parents aren't there. He's just an assistant, but he's telling people like he could help them out. He could get them a role. You know, I'm sure he's misguiding them to believe he's more important than he actually is.
Production assistant. I remember him being a pretty nice kid.
He was around a lot because as the PA, like it was his job to basically walk the kids around the set.
And this mother makes it clear that she really liked Jason. She got Jason's deets and gave them to her daughter, who was 11 years old at the time. Her daughter, Brandy, started communicating with Jason via the internet, which was kind of a new thing back then. And eventually, over time, the mom realizes that Jason is sending her daughter totally inappropriate videos of him masturbating.
It's Jason. Lisa and I would have Bible study on set and Jason would join us. He appeared to be this really nice, genuine person.
All right. Her daughter becomes extremely upset as well, but the mom decides not to report it because she's really worried about how it would make her and her daughter look. So it goes unreported.
Law enforcement had been tipped off about Jason Handy's inappropriate behavior towards children.
However, several years later, investigators contact Brandy's mom and they want her information because it turns out Jason Handy has been doing this to a lot of other kids. And they found a bunch of bags and jars with children's items inside of them in his apartment. And Brandy's name is on one of those bags. So they want to talk to her mom about potentially having Brandy testify to take Jason down.
Over 10,000 images of children, including 1,768 images of young girls in erotic poses.
That's right. Things were really bad, like worse than you can imagine with this PA. He actually kept a journal in his apartment of all of the horrible thoughts and feelings and activities he participated in with young girls. And he says, "This is all I care about. I want to be with young girls and I'll do anything to make it happen." That's probably why he wanted to work on Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon set. It's really sad, and he was charged, found guilty, and taken to prison, thank God. But he had been doing it for several years before anyone turned him in. All right, now you guys are going to find this hard to believe, but we're about to move on to an even more disgusting situation and story about another predator on the set of Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon shows.
Likes to hurt and tease pickles.
What drives me absolutely insane about this, you guys have to see it. It's going to blow your mind because it turns out Dan and this predator were laying it all right out for us on the table directly in front of us on the show of All That. I can't believe I don't remember this being part of the show, and I never noticed how effed up it was.
Pickle Boy was this, like, character that returned again and again and again throughout the seasons of All That.
Okay, we're only going to go into part of this because I can't tell the whole story right now. I need a break from this. All right, There was a man who was very friendly and very close with Dan Schneider. He appeared on many of Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon shows. His name is Brian Peck. And on the show called All That, Brian Peck played a character called Pickle Boy.
Hello? Anyone? I gotta get something to eat! A pickle.
You guys, this is where things get graphic. And I cannot believe there is not one adult on that set or one adult that watched this show and said, "Hell to the no! What the hell is this? Are you guys sick? What is going on here? This is totally inappropriate for a children's TV show." All right, trigger warning.
We just went with it. Pickles? Look, this is the mind of Dan Schneider. You gotta ask him. The pickles don't look like penises to you?
Okay, this is the one mom on set who gets it. And her kid ends up getting kicked off the show.
This is a children's television show.
Well, as you might imagine, it turns out Brian Peck wasn't only interested in pickles.
Brian Peck worked closely with Dan as this dialogue coach, and Brian is seen as this guy on set who's just helping with the kids. He is very much one of the cogs in the Dan Schneider machine.
Quiet. Nice. Unassuming. That was Brian. For a while. Until some of the people on set began to get to know him a little bit better. One of the kids describes a situation in which everyone was invited over to Brian Peck's house for some kind of a celebration. And while they're there, they end up finding Brian Peck's collection of John Wayne Gacy memorabilia.
Best wishes, your friend, John Wayne Gacy.
It actually turns out that Brian Peck had actively become a pen pal of John Wayne Gacy in prison. So it's not that surprising that it was only a little while later that Brian Peck was arrested for being sexually inappropriate with a child from Dan Schneider's show.
And this happens just after Brian Peck is arrested on 11 charges of child sexual abuse.
According to the kids we see interviewed for this docuseries, they didn't know that much about it. They weren't told an awful lot about what was going on, except that Brian Peck was no longer on set and people knew something weird was happening. Eventually, they were told about the allegations and everyone wondered, who was the kid who was inappropriately contacted by Brian? And episode 2 ends with a big reveal that a young man named Drake Bell, who appeared on several Nickelodeon shows, was one of the victims of Brian Peck.
It wasn't dealing with anybody on the shows or anything, right?
It was a child actor.
On one of our shows.
Yes.
All right, guys, we're going to stop here. We need a break from this. We'll come back for episode 3 tomorrow. And after episode 3, I'm going to do a deep dive into what's going on with Amanda Bynes right now. We also have several other kids from the Nickelodeon shows who are speaking out, and I want to show you some of that in my upcoming videos. But for now, I'm going to leave you with some of the TikToks and social media posts that are being made about the mother who did not report that her daughter Brandy was being inappropriately contacted by Jason, that PA from Dan Schneider's Nickelodeon shows.
If you're like me, you have not been able to stop thinking about Brandy's mom from the Quiet on the Set documentary, the woman who did not report literal sexual images being sent to her daughter over an email from Jason Handy, a man who she knew and was forced to work with all the time. And I think a variety of things bother me. I know everyone is like searching for information on where Brandy is now. And if you find it, please tell me in the comments, because it really bothers me that she was the one to share this story when in reality, like, she just heard her child upset and had been permitting them to be conversing without her reading it and without her being on top of exactly what was going on her internet conversation. And I know that like back then the internet was kind of new, right? Like parents were trying to figure out what it was and how cool it was and yada yada. But I wanted to share a personal story.
This fucking Jason Handy guy. Yes. He's worse in my opinion. This motherfucker come with like 2,000 child porno videos. He had little jars of kids like underwear and shit in his house. How do you even get kids jars? I don't know. Like a 7-year-old kid's underwear in jars and shit. He was the one that was like
He was walking them all to their car and to the section.
He was like the head of the kids.
Anyone can take me back, but this motherfucker.
Yeah, and he was the one taking them back.
And he was from Nebraska.
I don't know.
I believe.
I don't think he was from Nebraska. I don't want to say that.
Well, are you from Nebraska?
No, I am.
Oh, okay.
But the lady did say Jason Handy. I have this written down. Jason Handy. Damn, why the fuck did she say he was like a dorky white guy from Nebraska? Was he really from Nebraska?
I've never met
I think
Handy.
so. I think so.
Yeah, I don't think so. I'm not gonna throw Nebraska out like that.
That sounds like Nebraska.